There's really nothing more exciting than the launch of a new show, so I'm proud to be able to share with you this first episode of a brand new podcast from the good people at NIIT in association with The Learning Hack. Drum roll! The Learning Leaders podcast features conversations with chief learning officers and heads of learning from global companies. We'll be hearing about the learning journeys of these leaders, the changes they're bringing in their organizations, and how they're preparing their workforce for the future of learning. The following is a conversation with Gregg and Sailesh Lalla. Gregg is Chief Learning Scientist at NIIT and previously held professorships at Northwestern University and University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He has a PhD in Artificial Intelligence from Yale. Sailesh is Chief Business Officer at the company and leads learning outsourcing initiatives across North America and Europe. He's been a driving force behind NIIT's managed training services. We talked about the evolving role of AI in learning and development, the limitations of how it is currently being used in L&D, and the vast potential it has to transform learning experiences and performance. The challenge for L&D is to move beyond the simple, low-hanging fruit of content creation and chatbots and explore more strategic uses of AI that have a measurable impact on skill building and business outcomes. Gregg and Sailesh, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome to this special episode where we launch NIIT's Learning Leaders podcast. So a very special first episode, and it's pilot, so we can make mistakes and fail fast. Having said that, and the person's got to edit this, so really what I should be saying is just get it perfect first time.
No pressure. Glad to be here.
So over the last couple of decades, commentators and learning gurus have complained about L&D's addiction to courses, or alleged addiction to courses, that every performance gap, every learning need seems to result in a course. Now, generative AI is here, and the community is enthusiastically embracing its ability to create those courses a lot more quickly and cheaply. So what can you say to reassure those who fear that with AI we just get a load more ineffective click-next learning in greater quantity and at greater speed?
Well, I think the last part of your question kind of was a clue to what I think the answer is. I mean, I think people, when they complain about courses, are mostly complaining about bad courses. People rarely complain when a course has a demonstrable positive impact on performance. So the problem is we have a lot of junk courses that don't teach sensible things, don't teach whatever they're trying to teach effectively, and so on. And I actually think AI is going to change all of that. I think AI makes it possible to create courses that, have a direct, immediate, measurable impact on skill. And it basically, I think it's going to free us from the era of the awareness course. That is the course that just lays out a bunch of facts for you to sort of take or leave as a learner without really sort of grabbing hold of your performance and driving you to be able to do something better than you can do it today. And I think those courses are by and large ineffective, and I think we don't need to have them anymore because AI is going to make it possible to do something better.
I would add to that. If you talk to any business leader, if you talk to the head of sales or head of operations or the chief, anybody with the C-suite in the company, and ask them, what they care about, I don't think you'll hear that I want to do less courses. It's a myth within the learning and development world that we actually want, less courses or more courses or, shorter courses or longer courses. What business leaders really care about is performance. They want to improve performance through whatever means that are the most optimal and effective. And so I think that's a lens that I think we within L&D should always remember. There's a fad around microlearning, which is our favorite peeve that, Micro learning is the thing that everybody should move to. Shorter, 5-minute nuggets. And again, if you talk to business leaders, they will happily spend more time of their employees in learning if it actually leads to quantifiable improvement in their skills that matter to the business. So business leaders are really looking to solve performance gaps. They're looking to increase proficiency in the shortest period of time, and whatever interventions make sense. I think the problem, as Greg said, is that we've got plethora of these learning libraries that are disconnected to what the business outcomes that need to be delivered. And that leads to this notion that we need fewer courses. So, yes, I think AI is going to sharpen what we put in front of learners. It should, I hope. We've got some great examples. There's a Fortune 500 company who had subscriptions to these large, massive libraries of courses, which were not getting used, and they were paying millions of dollars in license fees. And they came to us and said, "What can we do?" And we said, there are 26 of these thousands of courses that are really, really important and are getting used. And instead of you licensing thousands, we can leverage AI to build really, really smart courses, these 26 courses that can replace your entire library. And that's what we ended up doing. So yes, it led to smaller amount of training, which was much sharper, and it didn't take that long to develop. But I think the problem, the ultimate underlying problem is not necessarily too many courses. It's courses that are not really aligned to business impact.
And AI possibly can help sharpen that up.
Absolutely.
Another frequent complaint about new learning technologies is that they too often produce solutions that are going looking for a problem. I mean, we heard this about VR, for instance, and I should say there is a lot of very good VR learning that we've seen that really works and really does something. But outside of simulations and dangerous environments, training and so on, it looks a little short of use cases. I don't want to kind of malign some great companies who are doing great work in soft skills for that, but really it feels like it's a bit limited, and very often you can get as good a result with something which is, I don't know, a couple of people in a room or pen and paper, and it just seems expensive and overblown. So this is something that comes up, I think, every time we get a new technology introduced, that it's a solution looking for a problem. Will AI similarly struggle to find viable use cases outside of course creation and help bots, which seem to be the things people are leaping to now? What are the real world problems that L&D people have right now that AI can solve for them?
Well, I think so. First of all, just really quickly on the problem with VR. I mean, I think VR had some very specific problems that have limited its use, that don't generalize. I mean, they're not just because it was a new technology. I mean, headsets just turn out to be a pain. People do not want to wear them. People don't want to stock them. It's a barrier that everybody underestimated, and it also remains pretty expensive to deliver something in VR. So I think those are kind of unique, specific problems there. I mean, what AI does is basically to offer the ability to have a real time interaction with a learner that feels completely open ended. And I mean, that's the problem that it solves. The problem, the problem we've had forever in learning is that we want, by and large, we want to build learning experiences that let learners, have an experience that resembles what they would have in real life on the job, trying to solve an actual problem that resembles what they need to be able to do professionally. And the limitation in that has always been that we can't give realistic choices when we build one of those, scenarios or simulations, because there's no way to just let the learner say or do anything they want. And this is, by the way, the same, a similar problem to the problem that people who create games have, right? That they want to have open-ended game environments where you just literally do anything you want, but they're limited to a small set of things their algorithms can actually process. And what AI does is it solves that problem. It makes it so that you can actually have open-ended inputs to a simulation. You can say anything you want. The AI can process it, and it can understand it, and it can sort of reason through what impact the thing that you've chosen to do in the simulation is actually going to have in the simulated world. And that to me is the key to everything. I mean that just opens up all the things that we have tried to do for decades, but have basically either failed or only done them partially.
And I think, and that's where I think there is a lack of universal understanding of what AI can do in learning. Today I think it's limited to, I will ask ChatGPT to write up content which I will use to create courses. I think that's, for most people, our understanding is limited to that's what AI can do,
Or use it as a chatbot.
or use it as a chatbot. And I think that's certainly one use of generative AI, but that's not the only one. When it comes to learning, one of the biggest revelations that we've had is AI can actually mimic anybody or anything very realistically in real time. So it can mimic a customer, it can mimic a boss, it can mimic a coach, it can mimic a company, it can mimic a set of colleagues and coworkers. It can mimic an environment. It can mimic anything that you make it to be a factory. And and I think we are just beginning to understand that capability. I mean, we've invested a lot of time in exploring that capability, but the rest of the world is just about beginning to understand that aspect of AI, because that is what can really revolutionize how AI can be used to real use cases. And the real use cases, once you try to understand that, are going to be things like accelerating time to proficiency. When you hire new people, and today it takes them a year, 2 years to become proficient or to become autonomous in their jobs, if we use AI really well, that could come down to a month. We could create mastery in people's professions using AI. So, for example, what pilots go through when they're learning to fly, that intensive simulator-based learning, it takes them years to get their license. We can bring that environment into each and every job role, whether it's a claims analyst or a teller at a bank or an underwriter in an insurance company. We can bring that job simulator, if you may, that can accelerate mastery in those professions. And companies who do that will have a significant competitive edge in terms of the proficiency of their people compared to companies who don't. Similarly, you can assess skills of people in a very, very realistic way. AI can be a great interviewer. It can interview people and really, really assess people's skills and then hyper personalize the learning experience that everybody gets. So I think there are a number of use cases that at least we are working on that push the boundary on beyond the fact that most people think AI is Google on steroids. I can ask it stuff and it'll create good content for me, or it'll be a chatbot that answers questions. But I think it's a lot more, and that's where I think the true power lies. It's not just keep producing what you do today, at a fraction of the cost and time, but it's start creating things that we dreamt but could never think possible in learning.
As we move beyond content creation, chatbots, you mentioned kind of simulations there, business simulations, role playing, assessment as well. So what other kind of advanced uses of AI are we not necessarily focusing on at the moment that have come out of the experiments that you've done? Because I know you've done an awful lot of work on kind of extending the thinking about how we can use AI in learning.
We launched what we call a maturity model of the use cases. So the maturity model at the lowest level is just do what you do today, but faster and much less expensive. But as you go beyond that, there is 3 other levels that we are working on, which truly start to look at leveraging AI in a very different way. So the level beyond that is create learning experiences that are, significantly more immersive, significantly more scenario driven. So that's sort of level 2. And level 3 is where things start really getting interested because you start using AI dynamically, not just statically, where you use AI to create, content and so on. But AI becomes an active part of the learning experience. So dynamic role plays, where dynamic simulations, dynamic assessments is where AI is an integral part of the learning experience in real time. And that opens up a whole bunch of use cases. And then finally, and Greg, you'll talk about it more intelligently than I can, but the ultimate use case is the personal tutor, which is, I think, where everything is going to converge to, where every employee or every human being, in a sense, is going to have an AI personal coach. It's like a personal trainer that we all, or some of us have. It's going to be our personal coach, our career coach, our skills coach, which I think is going to just literally change the whole world when it comes to learning. So, Greg, I know that's a big part of what you're looking to do as well.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think you described it well, Sailesh. I mean, it's the the technology makes it possible to have a single AI that's focused on you, so that it's able to sort of learn about you, like what your characteristics are as a learner, and as a person, how to get you excited and amped up and so on and so forth to learn stuff. And your context, so it can learn as much as you allow it to about your job, the challenges you're facing, the things you're struggling with, and so on and so forth. And we can load it with all of the pedagogy we know how to put into it. So we can prompt it in such a way that it's able to do all the things that we just reeled off, that it's able to do role plays on demand, it's able to conjure up simulations at different levels of granularity and so on and so forth, and run you through them to test your performance on different skills. And it's able to reason at a sort of, higher sort of agency level. It's able to reason about the big picture, what skills you're trying to learn and why. And it's able to help you prioritize them. It's able to help you find the best ways to learn each one. It's able to help you benchmark your progress. All the things that a really great human coach would do.
Within a corporate environment, it could also know all the job openings that are available to you, all the career paths within the company that you work for that are potentially possible, and it can use that intelligence as well to drive your learning journeys.
And sort of act like your agent. Like if you were in a profession where you were able to hire an agent, it could actually look out for you and say, hey, yeah, there's over in this other division, there's a perfect job for what you've been wanting to do. Let's get you ready for it. So, and I mean, ultimately, I think you started with the question about too many courses. I mean, I think for a while AI is going to create more courses because there are so many great use cases for it. But I think eventually courses are going to go away because of AI. Because what people in the medium term future are going to think when they think about learning is not, hey, let me look at a course catalog and see which courses I need. They're going to think to themselves, well, let me talk to my AI tutor and let's figure out what I need to learn. And it's going to create that learning on the fly. It's going to create sort of real time experiences for me that are completely customized to what I need and are not out of a sort of prepared, set of materials.
Oh, so that's given me the answer to my first question now, and that it's actually going to get rid of courses.
Yeah, well, I mean, there'll be more for a while, and then there'll be less, and then there won't be any at all, and then we won't even know what a course is.
Don't want to say that, obviously not in the short term, because otherwise you'd have to lay off an awful lot of, course creators. But yeah,
right, exactly, right, yeah.
Okay, I mean, it seems to me the things that it's added now that we just didn't have in digital learning until we came across generative AI was a piece of stuff that really knows your context. We've sort of had a bit of that with, a lot of kind of advertising and so on has been algorithmically driven already and so on. But my experience of working with ChatGPT, pretty extensively over the last year or so, with this business, that I'm doing with podcasting, is that you work with something that can remember. So I'll kind of ask things to do a transcript of my podcast. Then a couple of days later, okay, we're putting the podcast out. Can you do the social posts for this? And it already knows what you're talking about, and that's great. There's some missteps in there. It doesn't always understand you properly. I don't always make myself clear. And when I'm doing this, I'm thinking, what's this remind me of? And it reminds me of my early jobs where I was managing people. And you had like a bright young intern who didn't know anything. And you'd get them to do jobs. And suddenly, sometimes they do these magnificently. And other times they just demonstrate a depth of ignorance you hadn't suspected. And things go badly off the rails, And that led me to thinking, okay, so if this is drawing on the skills that I had as a manager, learning to interact with this thing, it must be a pretty good way of teaching people how to have those skills.
I think that's partly true. I think you're learning a bunch of interesting skills. And I mean, I think many people have commented that prompt creation is looking like being an enormous job category in the future, and in a genuinely new kind of skill set in the world. But to me, it seems to have at least three components. I mean, one is what you're talking about. You have to have a sense of how to frame a job for somebody, right? In some sense, in a way that they can hope to accomplish it in a sensible way. It sort of related to that. I mean, it also draws a little bit on the same kind of skill set that programming does. You have to be able to think sort of algorithmically, right? In order to, in order to prompt the AI to actually do something. Not necessarily if you just want it to write a paper for you or something like that, but if you want to set up an AI that runs a simulation or a role play or something like that, you have to think algorithmically. But at the same time, what you really have to be able to do, in my experience, is you have to be able to articulate very clearly the reasoning behind what you want it to do. And the more clearly you can explain why does this make sense to do it this way, the better the AI is able to perform. Give you one simple example of that. One of the challenges people face all the time with these large language models we're working with, the GPTs and Claudes and whatnot, is that, they've been trained to be sort of hyper positive and friendly, basically. And so it's very, very, very hard to get them to criticize anything in a straightforward way. It's probably their most obvious blind spot. You say, critique this, and they come back and they say, well, that's actually basically wonderful. Let me point out some good things about it. And you say, no, it's stupid machine. Right? But the way around that we found is you have to explain in detail to the AI why it's so important that it gives a solid critique. And you end up saying something like, the people we are training here have a very important job in the real world. It's vital that they understand how to do it properly. Right. And the only way they're going to learn how to do it properly is if, when they make a mistake, they're able to see the mistake and correct it. And it's your job to make sure that happens. And if you don't make sure that happens, we're going to let people go out in the world who have a flawed skill set, and they're going to cause problems. They might hurt people. They might disrupt business. So it's very important for you to do this. And then suddenly, when you put this explanation into the prompt, the AI, and this almost seems like magic, from the standpoint of 3 years ago, but the AI suddenly starts coming out with very sharp critiques because it understands the reasoning behind it. And that's what prompt writing is like to me, is iterations of that over all kinds of things that maybe you didn't even realize you had to explain before you started working with the AI.
And I think the world is going to change so dramatically. I think one sort of dilemma or myth that we constantly are, grappling with is, hey, well, AI is going to do everything that we are doing today, and therefore we're not going to need the people that we have to do what we are doing today. I think what people fail to grasp is that we won't be doing things that we are doing today. If we continue to do things that we are doing today in L&D or actually in any field, then yes, that will get done, probably better by AI. But the moment you start looking at elevating the complexity of the work that we do, because that's going to be possible and that's going to be required, then it is the human, the really skilled human who is skilled in prompt engineering and logical reasoning who will interface with the AI to produce these incredible experiences. So again, I think our minds seem to still be shackled with, hey, we're going to produce a course tomorrow, and we're not going to need the people that we do, but we're not going to produce the same course. I mean, the analogy is the Ford Model T in the early 1900s. Um, Today, if we produce the same car, it'll probably be available for less than $1. But we don't produce the same car, and the cars don't cost $1.
Yeah.
They cost more than $45,000 on average because of all the complexity that we have introduced in cars, which require a different level of skill sets to produce those cars. I think the same analogy will work for learning. We won't produce the same learning. We will create learning that is incredibly more complex to develop because it's going to, revolutionize how people's proficiency gets built and the time it takes to build proficiency.
Some people would say what we really need now is an EV that costs the same as a Ford Model T, rather than sort of these great big Humvee type things that Tesla is producing. But there you go. I think what's really interesting about this discussion is that, okay, prompt engineering, some people get very technical with that. And I know that where people are generating images with AI, people can go down to shutter speeds and size of lenses and things like that and can make it a matter of numbers like that. In general, I think the processes we're using interacting with AI lie very closely alongside what we're already doing in terms of training and managing and learning. And that's the really exciting part of it. To come back to your maturity model, you've named those 4 steps as accelerate, transcend, elevate, and unify. And Sailesh, you gave a very good description of how you kind of progress through those levels. How should L&D work to build in the competencies it needs to move up this ladder over time? And what are the organizational issues that these changes liable to raise for them that you can foresee? Behind this question lurks research from Egler Vinauskaiten, who found that it might be difficult for L&D to move beyond just the kind of content creation part of using AI, because once you move into the kind of coaching, co-pilot sort of area, you start to need other bits of the organization, and it means L&D has to reach out to other bits who are dealing with this, and it might not be their decision, in a lot of cases, and they might not have the data. So how does L&D move up that pyramid, bearing in mind the organizational situation it's in at the moment?
I'll give you my take on it. I think L&D, corporate L&Ds, L&D departments are going to have to focus on partnerships, and I'll tell you why. I've had a number of discussions with chief HR officers, chief talent officers of large companies around the world, and I was talking to a large big bank who's in 75 countries, and they said, look, we have access to the best minds in AI as a company. We have a deep relationship with Microsoft. We're talking to OpenAI directly. Google is here at our doorstep, looking at use cases within banking, and we are one of the largest banks in the world. The challenge, he said, was we have in the business, massive fish to fry. And all of that expertise, all of that energy, all of that knowledge is going to go towards transforming customer experience, transforming contact centers, transforming the how we run operations, because that's where we see significant opportunity. L&D is going to be number 27 in the list of priorities to get to, And therefore, we have to rely on partnerships. We have to rely on, organizations who are doing this at a massive scale and exclusively to push the boundaries, because internally there's going to be a lot of pressure, competing resources towards leveraging this expertise. So I think that's going to be a challenge that L&D is going to face, and unless they're open to exploring other avenues, if they rely just on their AI board and their AI team, that team is going to get to L&D maybe in 5 years' time, if at all. So I think that's number one. So I think partnerships, ecosystems are going to be critically important. But I think even more important is, I believe we are going to be restricted predominantly by our ambition when it comes to leveraging what AI can do for us within L&D and talent more broadly. So I think if L&D organizations can really start with an incredible ambition, then I think you can lay out a roadmap saying what can we achieve. So I think that's where I would urge talent leaders to think outside the box, become significantly more ambitious around what we can achieve. And then if you have to scale back, because of corporate constraints and things like, IT putting guardrails around what we can do and what we can't do, that's fine. But I think that if we start with a really bold, ambitious plan, then we are at least on the right track to achieve the outcomes that we are looking to achieve.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think L&D organizations are going to have to change radically, and I think some of them are going to basically fall apart before they reconstitute themselves, because I think this challenge is going to be huge. Like every habit pattern they have is kind of going in the wrong direction. But just to highlight two things, this this underscores a little bit of what Sailesh said. But when I first got into learning, into corporate learning, there were two things that shocked me. And I think both of those things have to change before L&D can make use of AI in a sensible way. And the first thing that shocked me was the number of L&D groups that are comfortable with the idea that their job is simply to convey information. There's so much learning just comes down to what might as well be a short white paper on something, right? We just tell people a bunch of stuff. We don't take responsibility for building a skill in them. We don't take responsibility for performance. And the second thing that always shocked me was, to me, the most obviously relevant information in a company to learning is what goes wrong. And every company in the world, has departments full of people who are doing very sophisticated analyses of reports in the field, incident reports, near miss reports, all kinds of audits. There's information all over the place, especially these days. And typically when you ask somebody in an L&D department, do you have information like that? They say, well, somebody collects that somewhere in operations, but got nothing to do with us. And that idea that it's got nothing to do with us just always blew my mind. It's like, what, if you want to train people, what could be more important than understanding what they struggle with? And how are you ever going to find that out other than to get empirical knowledge from the front lines and sort of saying what's going on? So I think AI, to really realize the potential of AI, we have to sort of reorient. So learning is always about building skills. It's never about simply telling people things. It's always about making them better at something. And we have to reorient so that the material that goes into the learning comes straight from frontline performance, comes from data about what is actually hard to do and why it's hard. And only when you know that can you construct a simulation environment that actually builds the skill you need and gets people ready for what they're going to face on the job. So I think those two things have to change, and I think that is going to be about as radical a transformation of L&D as you could possibly have. So that's the main thing I see. Of course, following on with that, there's going to be all the usual change management kind of things. People are going to be doing new jobs and doing them in new ways and struggling with that, and so on and so forth. But that's the big problem from my point of view. And I'm not sure I know how to solve it other than to yell at people about it. So that's sort of my role in the world, I guess.
Sarah, that really resonates with me about just this might sound a bit of a kind of a obtuse connection, but trying to write case studies and going to the people and say, let's make this a really interesting story. What was going wrong? That you had to do this training, that you had to spend all this money on this training. What was the terrible problem? So we can't talk about that. It'd be bad PR.
That's not an obtuse connection at all.
Because that's where it starts, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories for my instructional designers is, working with a large energy company, I'll just say, talking to the head of safety there, I basically said something to the effect of, we're going to simulate running an oil rig, and if you do something wrong enough, it's going to blow up. And this was some years ago, but the gentleman just basically turned white. He said, we don't use words like blow up here. Like, nobody's going to see anything blowing up in training as long as I'm here. And I just thought, wow, that is so wrong-headed.
Writing case studies in power generation and about oil rigs. I remember trying to write case studies about oil rigs, and they say, we don't use the word oil spill, hydrocarbon release.
But they don't even want to talk about that. They just want to show, there's a bad theory that you can never completely kill about learning, which is that all learning is learning the proper steps to do something right. And It has nothing to do with being exposed to what goes wrong. And I think that's changed. We see, with that client, it's completely changed 180 degrees. They've totally embraced, sort of training people on, to deal with real world problems. And so I think it's changing, but yeah, that's a pernicious bad attitude. That's, as though this were as you said, as though this were some kind of PR exercise, right? As though, like, we don't want people to get. I've actually had somebody say to me, in all seriousness, we don't want to show what can go wrong because people might internalize that and then do it, right? Yeah. As though people are so, so brain dead that if you just, like they're three, I guess the theory is that people are like 3-year-olds, that if you mention some naughty thing they might do, they decide they should try it out. But that's a crazy theory of learning.
I think there's another element to this, which has also been something that has plagued our industry, frankly, which is the level of intimacy that learning has with business, and we, I think, suffer as a function, as a profession, in the lack of intimacy that we have. And this is what Gregg is. Intimacy in the world of learning would be defined as every chief learning officer has a dashboard on their screen every day, which shows exactly in each factory, in each part of our operations, where is underperformance and by how much. And my job is every day go into the office and work towards eliminating that underperformance. If it's whatever that is. And I need to get a dashboard, which is where it's prioritized by impact. And what are the top 10 areas of underperformance that I'm going to eliminate today? I think that's the level of intimacy that, would be true business partnering. That's when business leaders would say that, this is a function that helps me truly deliver outstanding performance. And I think we shy away from that because of a variety of reasons. In many cases, it's the operating model of learning. In some cases, it's how learning is structured and organized. In some cases, it is the connectivity with the systems. We just don't have data to really pull it forward. But that's really what AI can help us accelerate as well, to bring forward all these hidden gems and give the chief learning and talent officer literally a path saying, this is what you should be working on, or that would mean the most value to the business compared to sort of the initiatives that we have, where we sometimes launch a learning initiative and go looking for results. It's sometimes as bad as that, whereas it should literally be the other way around.
And the AI can perform the role of that human accident investigators perform, right, in big business or in aviation, that kind of thing. And so that kind of analysis could be applied to much more mundane kind of jobs, right? I mean, if we want to look at people who are at fast food counters, or bank tellers, like salespeople. AI would make it possible to take reports from the field and analyze, the reasons behind the mistakes that happen, and sort of hand that over on a platter, basically, to the L&D department. It's pretty easy when somebody's done that analysis for you. If you see yourself as being in the skill creation business, when somebody hands you an analysis that says, "Here's 5 things that go wrong in the field all the time. Here is our in-depth causal analysis of why each one happens. Now see if you can build some training." It's not actually that hard. And the problem is we're not setting ourselves up to get that information in the first place.
And Greg, sometimes this information is actually available in systems and learning systems.
Yeah, even now, even pre-AI, it was there.
I mean, I'll give you an example again. We work with a very large insurance company who has 50,000 salespeople who are selling their insurance products. And, we've built a learning platform, which has, now almost embarrassingly, it has won us, more than 100 awards. And every year we win like 20 awards for this particular piece of work. And the underlying reason why we win awards is, and it would seem obvious, the system of record for salespeople is a CRM system. It's the salesforce.com or any. That's where they log in, everything that they have to do. They log in all their meetings. They that system knows how you're performing, what your closing ratios are, how do you do at each stage. And the simplest thing would be to plug in the learning system with the CRM system. And surprisingly, even something as basic as that has never been done before. So we did that. We built a learning platform which was deeply integrated with the CRM system, and it was able to hyper-personalize the learning experience. So the CRM knows, tomorrow, John, you've got an appointment with this particular type of client for annuities. I'm going to skill you up on annuities today so that you can do your job tomorrow. It also knows, over the last 6 months, you've been struggling with this type of clients in your closing ratios. Let me upskill you automatically so that you don't have to struggle with this. So even just something as basic as linking a learning system with whatever is the operating platform is something that we are really behind. And I hope that with AI we can really leapfrog to build that intimacy as well.
Absolutely. And it obviously the technology can help you there, but it is always a kind of a human problem. I remember the years of trying to, as an employee, but also as a consultant, trying to help marketing departments get more closely linked into sales departments. And it was very often, let us have access to your Salesforce. And the salespeople saying, out of my cold dead hands. I don't want them to fight. I don't want you guys to find out that I just made that client up and there never was a meeting. And but that's cynicism speaking. Anyway, so if we look at the industry today, at where we are in terms of what's available to people with AI and what they're actually taking advantage of right now, what's the next step beyond that? So, we're starting to talk about what AI can do for us in the future. But beyond what we're doing at the moment, what should we expect to see in the next couple of years? Because it will happen quicker in some places than others. Yeah,
well, quickly, sort of on the technical side of that, from my point of view, large language models are basically mature now. And what I mean by mature is, we can craft AI applications that have reliable behavior from them. We can make simulations and role plays and so on and so forth to do what we want them to do consistently over time. And so there, I think it's just a matter of deployment. And I mean, having said that, I mean that's not totally trivial, but it's there to be deployed. The technology to deploy it and to hook people up with role plays and simulations with the AI is totally there. It's just a matter of getting that actually built out. Where the next advances are coming. I mean, this won't shock anybody, but the generative AI tools to create imagery and video are not mature in the way that large language models are. And what I mean by that is, and I think anybody who's played with them has a sense of what I mean by that. It's almost impossible to get them to consistently do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Right. So they do brilliant stuff, and then
Yeah.
you say do that same thing but with one change, and they give you something completely different. Right. So they can't achieve consistency, and they can't achieve kind of exact adherence to what you want them to do. And they're still kind of slow in the sense, if you look at video, it still takes a long time to make a video, and you can't make a very complicated video. Although, to be fair, it's astonishing that you can make a synthetic video at all. But since we're, of course, greedy now that we can make any kind of synthetic video, we want to make all kinds of synthetic videos. So I think that's where the advances are going to come. I mean, in not too long, it's going to be possible to produce very consistent sets of still images that keep the characters straight and keep the setting straight. And then it's going to be possible to use those to support simulation. So if I want to do a business simulation with an AI, where we have, we're simulating a manager's job or something like that, it's going to be possible to make very, very nice, colorful, high-end, kind of vivid illustrations that go with each step in that simulation, right? And so I think that's going to be a somewhat big deal. But the really big deal is, assuming that we can keep making these things faster and faster, eventually it seems like it's going to be possible to have more or less real-time video creation for complex scenes. And there, I think the dam is going to break. I mean, I think that is going to be the innovation that really knocks everybody off their feet. Because, if and when it's possible to have a simulation with a video feed associated with it that looks like high definition video, but is responding in the moment to whatever you do as the learner, that's going to be amazing. And I think that's what's going to really get a lot of people's attention. So, if you imagine like simulating a factory, you're an operator in a factory, something like that. If you could see a video that looks like that factory responding to your control inputs and so on and so forth, or in the business social simulation world, if you could see a video of a meeting where you're playing the role of a manager, where everybody in the meeting responds to you in real time when you say something, I think those experiences will blow people's minds. So I think that's what's coming down the pike that I think is really going to, I think I see that as the point where, again, assuming we can achieve that, I think we can probably achieve that within the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, I think once we achieve that, I think the last holdouts to AI as the approach to doing learning will probably give up.
I think I agree with you, Greg. I think I'll also add that there is a difference between the underlying technology, which is the large language models or the video creation capability and so on, and the applications. And sometimes we confuse the two. I think, Greg, what I hear you saying is that there's a lot of underlying technology which is stable, like the large language models, but the applications are still being created. What do we do with a stable large language model? It is still something that we're just about beginning to deploy as applications and use cases in the real world. So I think, to answer your question, John, there are going to be two trajectories. I think there's going to be a trajectory of innovative applications leveraging the technology that we already have. I think you'll see a pretty significant explosion of that in the next year to 12 to 18 months, especially in corporate L&D. And then in parallel, as Greg said, there are going to be new inventions which will create a whole new world of new applications which we're not thinking of as well, like real-time video. What do we do with that? But even with stable large language models, we've just started to figure out what do we do with those, and I think those are going to be the two trajectories of innovation.
That's interesting. It's something you do see in tech a lot, isn't it? There's a kind of technological breakthrough that comes, and there's this capability that sits around for a while, and people are kind of using it. And then suddenly something comes along, like, say we had search for a while, the internet, but then Google came along and it was just a kind of UX innovation, really, that made it absolutely go bang. And then suddenly search was everywhere. Similarly with social media and Facebook, social media had been around for a number of years with kind of MySpace and so on. But Facebook made it really go nuclear. And those things are almost impossible to foresee because they're really more about usage than they are about production.
I think the ubiquity of deployment is we're still, at least in corporate L&D, other than the very basic sort of content creation tools, I think the ubiquity of deployment of applications is still something. I think that's going to be the next big. Somebody's going to come up with, a job simulator or a role play creator, which is going to just become ubiquitous. And you'll see millions of those across all the desktops in corporate America or corporate world. And, I think that's going to be the killer app with technologies which frankly are available today.
So as we move up the stages of your maturity model, what's the ultimate goal that we're headed to in learning terms? Because you're likely to see that quicker in some places than in others, as I mentioned. But I'm guessing that the Holy Grail, according to your model, is one-to-one tutoring and the solution of Bloom's 2 sigma problem, if I'm correct. Maybe you could explain the 2 sigma problem for those who makes it sounds like difficult maths, and then tell us how we get there.
Yeah, well, just in a nutshell, I mean, this is Bloom of Bloom's taxonomy fame, but this is this is sort of what he did after that. He looked at the effect of personal tutoring, basically, and, to put it very simply. And, if you compare sort of time to proficiency or other measures, but time to proficiency is sort of an obvious one. For people being trained with and without a personal, with and without personal tutoring on otherwise the same basic material, right? So it's almost like if you imagine one student's taking a class, but the family hired a personal tutor to sort of get them up to speed. The other family, the kid's just taking the class. If you have those two cohorts, you get 2 standard deviations of improvement in the performance of the people who get the private tutoring to the people who don't, which is of course enormous, right? And the reason he called it the 2 sigma problem was because his point was basically, look, we know this is possible to achieve, but we just don't seem to have the practical means to achieve it. We can't tutor everybody. How can we solve that as a problem? How can we get everybody this incredible boost to their performance that's theoretically possible? And I mean, literally, there hasn't been an answer to that question, challenge, problem, whatever you want to call it, until AI, because it was just simply a matter of there's not enough labor to go around. You can't hire enough people to be you can't hire a tutor for everybody, otherwise everybody would have to be a tutor. So, so AI actually, and that basically just, I mean, this is kind of common sense, I think, but that just sort of frames the dramatic impact this could have, right? That, if everybody can get personal tutoring, that is, an intelligent entity that is not merely feeding the material, not even merely making them practice something, but actually analyzing their understanding at every moment and thinking about what is the best thing to do next to improve it. That's just astonishing, and that is in fact a thing that AI is capable of. And so the ultimate thing for us is, I hesitate to describe it to people because when you describe it, it just sounds like all the science fiction movies we grew up with, right? So it sounds like I'm just having a flashback to Star Trek or something. It's like,
Yeah.
right? Because what it's going to be is you're going to have this kind of AI, slightly disembodied personality that you get to know, who's sort of present for you in all your devices, in some sense tracks through your days, again, to the extent that you allow it to, watching your performance, sort of observing what you're doing, keeping track. And it's going to act like a coach. It's going to say, "Hey, we got an hour here. Like, what do you think? What do you say we spend it, working on, skill XYZ?" And you'll negotiate with it whether you're willing to do that or not, and then it'll say, "Okay, let's start with a role play. Let's start with the simulation. Let me give you some, challenge problems to solve." And it's going to act like you hired an expert to be your coach, right? The way if you were a world-class tennis player, you would hire a coach, and your coach presumably would sort of chivvy you all the time to, do some practice and, work on the things you need to work on. It's going to be like that. So I think it's going to be it's going to be much more like science fiction than like an evolution of anything that we're used to, having in our lives. It's basically the bottom line.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's an element where, because of huge amount of personal stake involved with many companies, I think there is this notion that is dumbing down the art of the possible as well. And I have a peeve against assistance as the ultimate nirvana of what AI can do. So there's a lot of push on everybody's going to have an assistant on their desktop and Copilot or whatever, and it's going to help you do your task really well.
And we're already seeing reports people don't use them just because they're passive.
They're passive, and so, but I think it is shifting our minds in a way, or limiting our minds to just expect that out of AI. Whereas, Greg, I think what you're talking about is the world's best coach, the most talented coach that was only available to elite athletes who make bazillion dollars a year. That kind of capability can be available to an average individual, if we set it up well.
Yeah, it seems here the thing we're talking about is agency. I mean, and you do hear this word agents a lot, don't you? And agentic is now an adjective that see all over the place. And what you're talking about there, Sailesh, is a move from a kind of passive assistant that you can call on when you need it, and you have to click on it and bring it up, to a coach who's kind of slightly in your face.
Or it'll annoyingly irritate you,
Go away, Mr. Clippy, is the immediate reaction. But this would be a useful coach. It would be like, I don't know, Andy Murray's mother or someone like
Exactly.
that you would feel an almost parental kind of relationship with.
Yeah, and presumably it would dial itself in to match whatever you are able to be comfortable. But I think people miss this completely. And I mean, just to extend that, people talking about AI assistants, again, the results have been sort of disappointing so far. And again, it's because they're totally passive. It's like you can ask them to do a thing, but they'll only do exactly what you ask them to do. And I think when people think about smart assistants, if you think about human personal assistants, or if you even think back to the golden era of personal assistants, when we called them executive secretaries or whatever, the people who made those roles incredibly valuable were essentially, for the most part, women who probably could have been executives on their own, sort of in a fair, job marketplace, but were forced to be the assistants of powerful, executive males. And, they didn't simply show up at the office and say, okay, tell me what to do now. Right. I mean, they brought, the ability to think through, sort of from the strategic level on down. What are we trying to do here? What makes us successful? And so they were able to be super proactive, right? They were able to sort of think about what, you're not going to want to take this meeting. You are going to want to see this meeting. I rearrange your schedule to make sure it makes sense. I send an email off with your signature on it, I'm blah, 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 blah.
Did you try cleaning?
Yeah. Did you try? Well, we weren't. don't have to get into all that.
We'll all have worked in companies, where, especially in
Yeah.
startups, where there is a kind of the CEO's PA effectively runs the company.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and they don't do it by simply being order takers, right? I mean, they do it by being totally proactive, and yeah. So I mean, that's sort of a long-winded way to say, yeah. I mean, I think this point of agency is crucial, and people are kind of missing it right now when they're talking about AI assistants, because you only really want that kind of assistance if the entity is really kind of thinking ahead of you. And if it's thinking behind you, it becomes a chore almost. It's like, well, like talking back to what when you were sort of talking about having interns. I always found there's sort of two kinds of interns. There's the proactive interns who actually take things and run with them, and you think, wow, that's never thought. But then there are the interns who just show up in your office periodically and say, well, what should I do now? And I mean, I think anybody who's dealt with that sees that essentially feels like a job, like a chore for me. It's like, I mean, I have to sit there, well, I don't know, what should you do now? Like, I don't know. I mean,
the problem with being a boss is not everyone imagines the problem with being the boss is that these people just won't do what I tell them to do. But the bigger problem is very often these people do exactly what I tell them to do, and that's all they ever do.
Well, only do what I tell them to. Exactly. Right, and the thing is, and so that's, people are replicating this mistake with AI right now, and the AI has the capability of doing much more than you tell it to, but a lot of people aren't seeing that yet. And I mean, to be fair, I mean, there is another side to this, which is, I mean, when you give AI agency, obviously you are increasing the scope of, like where something might go wrong. And so you do start to sort of tickle that kind of, fear we have from those other kind of science fiction movies, like, what if the AI starts taking over and
hail our robot overlords?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I mean, you have to acknowledge that there is that lurking concern. And so I think there's going to be a lot of push and pull when it comes to giving AI agency, because there are going to be people who are scared, and in some cases, rightly so, that, if we let it do too much on its own, based on its own sort of agency or its own internalization of goals, then, who knows what could happen, kind of thing.
And I think there's one other factor. I think, to close this out is, we all know there's enormous amount of money going into AI. All the big tech companies are investing, billions, if not trillions of dollars. And there is this mad rush to own. I mean, the next bastion of tech growth is going to come from owning the employee experience. That's where, whether it's the Copilot, whether it's Slack, whether it's, all the big companies, or it's Workday and so on, they're really dying to own the employee experience or some part of it. And this is where there's going to be all kinds of ideas. There are going to be great ideas, there are going to be average ideas, and there's just bad ideas. And the threat that L&D is going to have is to get just buried in all these big tech companies, pushing down, lots of initiatives to own the employee experience, and the learning experience is going to get muddled in this whole rush. And I urge learning leaders to sort of have a more informed sort of approach on, what they'll experience as an onslaught to owning the employee experience, and guard the learning experience as best as they can, because it can otherwise get really, really muddled. And I think, if there's one advice, I think owning the learning experience, really crafting the learning experience in the world of AI, it should be our number one priority. Otherwise, we're going to just get, really, whitewashed with all of this, stuff that's coming to us from corporate tech, which is ultimately going to create a terrible learning experience in my mind.
We're getting into an area now where it does start to raise problems. And I think we know the typical L&D professional, without stereotyping, is a people person, and that's their great strength, and it's a really important strength. and I get the sense that quite a lot of them are fairly worried by AI. It's all these issues around trust and so on, and it's not that they're kind of running away from the future. It's just that they can see problems which I think we all know are going to come up in the future, which is that their distinctive skills of human understanding might suddenly become redundant, or they just won't get listened to when they kind of, raise issues, and their working lives become less congenial as a result. So what is the role of humanity in this bright future you paint? How can we all guarantee that humanity continues to be there on top as a guiding principle?
Somebody famous once said, as long as we can pull the plug on the AI, we're going to be on top. And I think at one simple level, we're going to engineer it so that, humans have the final say. And I'm not too worried about it at that cosmic, existential level. I think at the level of, can we make sure that the jobs we want to be doing stay the way they are? I think the answer is probably no. We can't. Just because we want a job to be a certain thing, that doesn't mean it's going to be that. But I guess I would say this isn't something we're going to be able to control in that sense. But I take heart, Sailesh sort of referenced, past technological revolutions. I sort of take heart from looking what happened globally in all those, right? Many jobs have gone away. People don't, there's not a huge industry in horses, for example. There's not, somebody did the calculation that, it used to require a person to process every check, manually. And somebody did a calculation that said if we still did that today, literally every human being in the face of the planet would be required to process all the checks that get made, and that job went away. Lots and lots of jobs go away. It could be that what we think of as the standard L&D job, the standard instructional design job, in a sense, is going to go away. But what's always happened in the past is that, and Sailesh referenced this earlier, that new jobs come along. There are new things to do. And the new things to do usually are basically exploring all of the amazing things we can do with this new technology.
I agree with that, and I think it's the lag between the first and the second, which is the heartbreak. Saying, some jobs are going away, and there aren't enough of the new ones that cause enormous amount of heartbreak. But eventually, I think we get over that lag and we go along. But I think that's where I think as leaders of learning and talent, we have a significant role to play in lifting our game, and in imagining what the future can be as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we risk our own teams becoming redundant because what they do today will get done by AI sooner or later. So, I think as all business leaders, as all talent and learning leaders, it's our responsibility, in my mind, to create that future as quickly as we can, and that's, to me, our commitment to our employees, our commitment to our children, our commitment to our world, to accelerate creation of the new world as quickly as possible, so that we don't, we minimize the lag between when what they are doing today, or what all of us are doing today, is not going to be needed tomorrow. So all the more urgency to create the future.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I'll give my optimistic view of this. I can't prove it based on anything, but I think what we have today in corporate L&D, most of what, and again, this sort of cycles back to the first question you asked. Most of what corporate L&D on the whole produces is bad, right? It's not good training. It's not effective. It kind of wastes people's time. Probably for many people, the main image of a corporate L&D product right now is this page-turning e-learning that you're forced to go through every year on some compliance topic, and like a bunch of people I know who are, work in the corporate world, they just sigh. Like, my wife works in the corporate world. I can almost tell when she goes, "Oh, geez," what's the problem? It's like, I have to do another e-learning. Right. We're as an industry, we're producing pretty bad stuff. And I think what's going to happen if, when we deploy AI is we're going to start to be able to produce stuff that actually works. I mean, that actually does build skills, that actually contributes to performance, that actually can be measured on the bottom line. And I think the demand for learning is going to go way up. I think, as Sailesh said, responsible corporate leaders, don't really care about the details of learning. What they care about is, are you actually affecting performance or not? And if you're not, I want to cut your budget and minimize what you're doing. And if you are, I'll grow it as long as as the investment pays off. And I think we're going to enter an era of massive growth of learning. It's going to become much more central to the strategy of companies. And I think there's going to be, therefore, an actual sort of explosion in L&D jobs, not a shrinkage. So that, I again can't prove it, but that's what I think.
It's worth pointing out that there has been a period before where about 50% of L&D jobs just disappeared over a period of years. According to Clive Shepherd, who some of you may know, learning guru, operative a while ago, so that when learning management systems first started to come in and the internet just got going, between the kind of late 90s and the early noughties, most of the administrative staff in training departments just went. They went somewhere else. They weren't completely unemployed, but L&D lost a lot of headcount at that point, and they were replaced by other people, instructional designers and so anyway, I think it's been a really worthwhile investment for people, certainly for me. This conversation with you guys, looking forward into the future and into some of the specifics of how AI is going to affect us over the next few years. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah,
it was great. Nice talking to you, John. Take care.
That's all on the Learning Leaders podcast for this time. Many thanks to our guests. Learning Leaders comes from NIIT in association with The Learning Hack. To make sure you don't miss an episode, please subscribe to the show on your platform of choice or on YouTube. And if you want to help others find us, please make sure you like, rate and give a glowing review. We'll be back in your feed very soon. So until next time, keep the faith, keep leading, and above all, keep learning.